To investigators, every single clue suggested she played a direct role in Larry's demise. Lorie Eisenberg masterfully played the innocent card, repeatedly denying any knowledge of foul play. 1 month prior, she allegedly coaxed him into a desolate Idaho waterway, sinking Larry over 200 feet into the murky depths. She genuinely believed her theatrical performance would perfectly mask the sinister reality of her actions. Her story hinged on a frantic, failed attempt to grab his arm before the fatal plunge. Little did she know, detectives already viewed her not as a tragic widow, but as a ruthless killer. Larry's autopsy would soon reveal a massive, lethal cocktail of medications hidden within his system. Piece by piece, the evidence would expose that detectives had been interviewing a cold-blooded killer from the very beginning. The ultimate question remained: did she brutally murder Larry, or was she completely innocent? On the freezing morning of February 13, 2018, rural Idaho dispatchers answered a frantic 911 call from 64-year-old Lorie Eisenberg. The operator demanded an emergency address, while the panicked caller shrieked for help from the dark waters. Struggling to comprehend her hysteria, dispatch pushed for a location, but Lorie claimed she was hopelessly adrift. She babbled about her husband suffering a sudden stroke and tumbling overboard, claiming she had searched for hours. Emergency responders and local deputies immediately sped toward the icy depths of Lake Coeur. While dive teams scoured the surface for Larry, officers began probing Lorie about the moments preceding the tragic accident. Deputy Baum from the sheriff's office gently introduced himself to the seemingly devastated woman. He calmly explained that gathering basic information would help them determine their next strategic investigative steps. Spotting a glaring physical anomaly, the investigator immediately asked how she had bloodied her own face. She frantically explained they both collapsed, resulting in her smashing her nose against the cabin door. Offering professional reassurance, the deputy confirmed that elite recovery squads were actively searching the waters for him. After promising their full effort, he strategically pressed her to estimate the exact drop zone. She gestured vaguely toward the shoreline, prompting him to ask about any recognizable structures or distinct natural landmarks. Understood. Maintaining his steady tone, the officer pushed for a solid distance estimate from their current position. He clarified the question, asking for the exact distance from where the fireboat had intercepted her. He attempted to establish their proximity to land, but her answers devolved into incoherent rambling. She theorized a sudden medical crisis caused the deadly fall, heavily emphasizing his bizarre behavior beforehand. According to Lorie, he complained of sickness and acted erratically before inexplicably inspecting a perfectly functional engine. She continued her story, recalling how she questioned his strange actions at the back of the vessel. She vividly described him glancing back, his facial expression remaining completely unreadable and eerily calm. She then backpedaled, stating he looked terrible before toppling over, while her desperate rescue attempt ended in failure. He listened. He calmly interrupted her rambling, reiterating that highly skilled rescue specialists were thoroughly sweeping the area. He subtly planted a seed, urging her to dig deep into her memory while paramedics evaluated her. Acknowledging her trauma, he gently requested she immediately report any geographical clues or visual markers she might recall. Lorie perfectly played the shattered, hysterical widow. While the incident initially resembled a medical emergency, glaring inconsistencies were already fracturing the grieving widow's carefully constructed alibi. Specifically, the massive delay in contacting authorities immediately stood out, a lapse she conveniently blamed on a misplaced phone. She further alleged that a malfunctioning motor hopelessly stranded her, turning a simple trip to shore into a nightmare. Away from the suspect, the seasoned lead detective quietly pulled a rookie aside to deliver a crucial lesson. He warned that in homicide investigations, the weeping victim and the cold-blooded killer are often the same person. He noted the suspect's bleeding face, questioning her highly convenient excuse of sustaining the injury during a botched rescue. Her panic felt deliberately staged. The veteran warned his trainee never to ignore their gut instincts when a survivor's story feels psychologically manufactured. Investigators assured the family they were doing everything possible, deploying their top personnel to the scene. Authorities transported Lorie to a local medical center to have personnel examine her battered, bloodied face. Detectives intercepted her post-evaluation to extract some preliminary answers. Instead, her statements only birthed deeper mysteries. The interrogator demanded they jump ahead, pressing her to clarify the exact moment his supposed medical emergency began. She claimed profound disorientation regarding their exact coordinates, recalling only that she was groggily regaining consciousness when he allegedly muttered something about the resort. According to her narrative, he pointed out the lodge, suggesting they dock there for their morning meal, as previously discussed. She describes snapping out of her heavy sleep, resigning herself to the fact that it was time to eat breakfast. They supposedly conversed briefly. Conveniently, she claimed complete ignorance regarding the exact timeline. Suddenly, he stood. She noted that he inexplicably leaned his dead weight against the ignition, potentially snapping the key entirely. She characterized his sudden movements as highly unnatural. She claimed she stared in quiet confusion as he scrambled upward with jarring speed. They had not been actively fishing. There was no sudden excitement. No chaotic scramble had occurred. The investigator abruptly challenged her account, questioning the strange detail about him crushing the key. She stumbled, nervously attempting a quick recovery. She hesitated, confirming. Retracting her certainty, she stated she never actually witnessed the impact, only observing an ambiguous motion that fed her assumption. She maintained that upon attempting to restart the vessel afterward, the crucial ignition piece was already completely mangled. The metal was undeniably warped, complicating the narrative around the console. Correction. She frantically altered her timeline, insisting this specific destruction occurred much earlier. Following a completely failed ignition attempt, he supposedly extracted the ruined metal, noting that two small, vital screws had mysteriously sheared right off the console's outer housing unit. Detectives instantly circled this particular anomaly as a glaring red flag. The vessel's starter key was obliterated. It was not merely warped, but violently folded over, a structural failure demanding a terrifying level of blunt, intentional force. Authorities initially theorized the damage resulted from a desperate physical altercation, or perhaps a violent collision against the dashboard during a struggle. Her story continued with him allegedly complaining about sudden mechanical failures. She claimed he rose abruptly, navigating heavily toward the stern engine compartment, aggressively pushing past the windshield partition as the vessel drifted blindly forward into open water. He then firmly sealed it. He shifted toward the electric trolling system. She recalled questioning his bizarre actions, to which he coldly repeated that the machinery was malfunctioning. She quickly reminded him it was completely disengaged. She painted a picture of herself seated, observing him fixedly from a short distance, as he engaged in entirely erratic, unexplainable behaviors. He purportedly tinkered obsessively with the console. Without warning, he turned back to lock eyes with her, casting a deeply unsettling gaze. He had been hunched over the complex mechanics. Then, breaking the tense silence, he suddenly stood straight up. Rising with alarming speed, he stared her down. She described his expression as chillingly empty, a vacant void, completely devoid of human emotion. Without uttering another word, he pivoted sharply, fully turning his back toward her. In her fractured retelling, she believed he blindly reached out toward the nearby glass panel, his erratic movements completely devoid of logical purpose. Panic allegedly set in. She bolted from her chair, only to find the central partition effectively blocking her only path forward. The fatal descent began. As he tipped backward, she launched upward, desperately shoving the rigid barrier aside to grab him. She claimed to have lunged and lost her footing, grabbing only empty air as gravity pulled him beneath the dark, freezing surface. He never broke the surface again. She vividly recounted a final, fleeting glimpse of his heavy sweatshirt vanishing underwater, suddenly gripped by the terrifying realization that the unmanned vessel was steadily powering away, abandoning him to a horrific, icy fate. Desperate, she claimed she scrambled toward the cabin, severely hindered by the canvas enclosure and its tangled, stubborn zippers. She stumbled hard onto the deck before managing to force the obstructions aside. She frantically searched, finding zero trace of him remaining. She struggled mapping her exact movements. Pivoting sharply portside, she desperately scoured the murky waterline. Investigators zeroed in on the mechanics, clarifying that the primary combustion engine remained actively engaged at the exact moment he vanished into the abyss. She confirmed this grim detail, leaving the vessel coasting at a low idle. The detective locked down the timeline. They were not speeding, yet the heavy propeller continued churning relentlessly through the pitch-black water. During her interrogation, Lorie insisted their watercraft maintained a crawling speed. She claimed to have glanced back, only to find Larry vanished. Lorie described rushing frantically across the deck, screaming his name, but the water remained chillingly still. She allegedly waited with a flotation device, expecting him to resurface, yet the surface remained empty. Her official statement detailed a panicked pacing, calling for a husband who was nowhere to be found. Eventually, she claimed to steer the vessel aimlessly, hoping to spot him in the dark. Trauma often induces erratic behavior, yet the actions of the guilty typically defy all logic. Lorie supposedly navigated the waters for 90 minutes searching for Larry before seeking assistance. She then allegedly idled across the water using the secondary motor, looking for civilization to alert authorities. Hours after her husband disappeared into the depths, she miraculously discovered his mobile device and summoned law enforcement. The narrative was bizarre, but it fractured further. Over multiple interviews, Lorie provided investigators with 3 entirely different spots where the device surfaced. Detectives were already highly skeptical when, during the recovery efforts, she was apprehended for unrelated offenses. This sudden arrest cast a much darker shadow over her tale. She justified her financial crimes by citing her children's medical debts, insisting she intended to return the funds. Lorie rationalized the theft, maintaining she only siphoned the resources to support her family's needs. When pressed by detectives about the stolen amount, she feigned ignorance regarding the total sum. She casually admitted to taking $200,000 over 2 years, promising full restitution. She held the executive director position at a charity named the North Idaho Housing Coalition, an organization she drained of $500,000 within a 4-year window. Authorities booked her on 1 grand theft charge and 40 forgery counts. Yet, detectives remained fixated on homicide. Securing a homicide conviction without a corpse or forensic proof is virtually an impossible task. Given the icy conditions where Larry supposedly met his demise, investigators feared his remains were lost forever. Freezing depths seldom surrender their victims. Sub-zero environments halt decomposition, often keeping corpses anchored to the dark sediment for decades. However, a grim discovery provided the family with closure when a resident reported remains washing ashore. On March 1st, authorities arrived at the shoreline, positively identifying the 68-year-old victim as Lorie Eisenberg. The ensuing autopsy unearthed the ultimate damning evidence. While anticipating her fraud trial, Lorie faced a chilling interrogation. Detectives opened the interview with a deceptively casual greeting to gauge her composure. Detective Ken gently reminded the suspect of their previous encounter at her residence. The atmosphere in the room remained unnervingly quiet. Pleasantries were briefly exchanged as the investigators established a psychological baseline. The detectives noted their surprise regarding her pending transfer to the Dublin facility. She acknowledged the strange delay in her transport, while detectives slowly steered the conversation toward the distant past. They emphasized how much time had passed, hinting that their sprawling investigation was finally concluding. The authorities framed the visit as a simple, final check-in to gather her perspective on the unfolding events. They offered her an opportunity to hear their findings and provide her own version of the truth. The detectives placed the illusion of control in her hands, asking for her consent to proceed. With a simple nod, Lorie permitted the questioning to commence. They clarified that this discussion would pivot entirely away from her previous financial convictions. Her white-collar crimes had already earned her a 5-year sentence behind bars. The detectives casually inquired about potential early release protocols within the federal prison framework. They noted she might secure freedom in 3 or 4 years with good behavior. However, the tone shifted coldly as they revealed the true purpose: looming criminal charges for an entirely different nightmare. The detective began by confirming that her previous interrogation had likely been conducted by Special Agent Gunnison. He needed to verify if Gunnison had already read her rights and explained the standard procedures. She offered a quiet confirmation before he pivoted toward 5 crucial focal points. Following the reading of Lorie's rights, the investigator wasted no time getting to the point. He immediately sought to meticulously go over her existing statement to ensure every single detail was entirely accurate. The psychological tension escalated. He recounted her strange narrative. She and Larry had supposedly been battling illness for weeks, yet suddenly devised an impromptu romantic scheme to spend a freezing morning out on the dark lake waters. Their alleged plan involved catching the early sunrise before casually cruising toward the Coeur d'Alene resort. According to her story, they launched the boat at dawn, headed into open water, and she somehow peacefully drifted off to sleep. Upon waking, she claimed Larry was behaving erratically, obsessively insisting that something was mechanically failing with the boat's outboard motor. From that exact moment, the grim situation supposedly rapidly deteriorated. He allegedly went to the front, attempted to fix the trolling motor, looked severely flushed, and suddenly exhibited horrifying medical symptoms resembling a massive stroke before plunging headfirst into the murky depths of the freezing water. The calculating detective pressed her to confirm this specific timeline. Was this trajectory entirely correct? She stammered defensively, desperately insisting she had absolutely no idea what was medically destroying him at the time. The investigator summarized the fatal moment, noting that Larry, inexplicably, simply toppled over the vessel's edge. After desperately circling the dark waters in a supposed attempt to rescue him, she claimed she ultimately managed to recover his cellular device from the drifting vessel. Yet, glaring investigative inconsistencies surrounded the exact physical location where she initially claimed to have miraculously discovered that crucial piece of digital evidence following the tragedy. Detective Jackson had served as the assigned recovery diver. She initially told authorities she stumbled upon the hidden device while frantically grabbing a thick blanket to fend off the biting morning cold. Jackson noted her bizarre story about finding it buried within that blanket right beside the responding medical personnel. Later, she alleged it was safely tucked inside a coat pocket, but told this specific investigator it was resting cleanly on the dashboard. When directly confronted about the true location, she stubbornly maintained that every provided version was entirely factual. The detective tactically accepted the dashboard narrative for the moment, shifting his psychological focus to the broader scope of physical evidence. He highlighted glaring case anomalies, directly referencing the official sworn affidavit recently published by the local press over in the city of Spokane. The exact investigative details leaked to that specific newspaper still remain somewhat shrouded in mystery. They calmly acknowledged the specific document that had circulated throughout the local media. The interrogation aimed to ruthlessly lock down these discrepancies, ensuring that when the finalized case eventually reached the prosecuting attorney, it painted a flawlessly accurate reflection of the exact evidence uncovered during the exhaustive criminal investigation. Investigators already knew shadowy events had previously occurred involving the highly controversial situation with the coach. Then, there was the deeply unsettling reality of Larry's ultimate demise. The detective bluntly noted that intense public speculation would inevitably connect the two events, accusing her directly of orchestrating her own husband's brutal murder. The underlying mystery remained brutally simple. Did she intentionally kill Larry, or was she innocent? Investigators needed to relentlessly dial in the concrete facts to support one definitive, undeniable conclusion. Personal theories meant absolutely nothing in this room. The physical forensic evidence was the only truth that truly mattered. He quickly dispelled the persistent television myth that law enforcement officers directly sentence suspects to spend the rest of their natural lives rotting in state prison. In stark reality, seasoned detectives like Bryant and Dennis simply gathered the cold, hard, indisputable facts. He offered her one final, highly calculated opportunity to amend her initial narrative before the investigative trap permanently snapped shut around her, forever sealing her fate based on these crucial details. She quietly offered her agreement. The grim interrogation steadily proceeded. The narrative completely darkened once Larry's autopsy concluded. The official toxicology screening detected a shockingly massive quantity of diphenhydramine, the powerful active ingredient commonly found in over-the-counter allergy medications and heavy cough suppressants. The sheer, unnatural volume of this everyday sedative practically demanded a sinister criminal explanation to determine what truly happened. The laboratory results were completely damning. Exactly 7,100 nanograms per liter of diphenhydramine coursing actively through his lifeless bloodstream. A standard therapeutic dosage safely tops out anywhere between 100 to 1,000 nanograms per liter. The administered dosage was entirely lethal. During the initial search of the vessel, crime scene technicians had actually pulled an empty allergy medicine vial and a hollowed juice bottle straight from Lorie's purse. Detectives strongly theorized the sweet liquid was deliberately utilized to mask the bitter, chalky flavor of the pulverized pills. The medical examiner's forensic findings presented a genuinely chilling reality. Larry was already entirely deceased before ever hitting the dark water. He had suffered a fatal, orchestrated overdose aboard the vessel, ultimately shoved overboard by his sole companion, his trusted wife of 15 long years. Detectives kicked off the interrogation by focusing on the fateful morning at the boat ramp. They pushed the suspect to retrace her steps, estimating a departure time around 5 o'clock. Stubbornly, she dug her heels in, refusing to alter a single detail of her story. The investigator acknowledged her defiance with a cold stare, but investigators quickly pivoted, confronting Lorie with a mountain of damning mobile phone data. Her social media footprint painted a sinister reality, sharply contradicting her carefully crafted alibi. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the lead detective leaned in with a crucial inquiry. He methodically laid out her disturbing internet history leading up to the Florida trip. Her browser queries revealed a chilling obsession with nautical depth charts and nighttime water visibility. The sheer volume of digital breadcrumbs left a deeply suspicious trail. When challenged to justify these morbid anomalies, her initial response was an evasive shrug. Realizing the walls were closing in, she abruptly suggested she should have secured legal counsel. Unfazed, detectives coldly reminded her that facing these grim facts was essential to closing the investigation. They pressed further, directly asking if she had already placed a defense attorney on retainer. The question hung in the heavy, suffocating silence of the interrogation room. A calculated, tense pause settled between them. Detectives reiterated that getting to the absolute truth was their only remaining objective. They offered one final, fleeting window for her to explain the damning evidence before prosecutors took over. Deflecting, Lorie played the victim, feigning total ignorance about the dark rumors swirling around her. She vehemently denied the mounting allegations, acting utterly bewildered by how anyone could suspect her. Cutting through the facade, investigators sharply noted that her feigned confusion was exactly why she was sitting there. Law enforcement made their agenda clear. The trust was shattered, and they were hunting for facts. Desperate to regain control, she insisted the accusations were pure fiction, wishing they would just believe her. Paranoia crept into her voice as she referenced the sensationalized headlines splashed across local newspapers. She blamed anonymous informants, desperately clinging to a fragile illusion of complete innocence. Changing tactics, the detectives stopped asking questions and began laying out the irrefutable timeline of her downfall. They wanted her trapped by the facts, fully aware of the corner she was backed into. They documented how, prior to the 24th, highly suspicious activities had already plagued the coalition. On the morning of the 24th, despite facing suspension, she deceptively offered the board her complete cooperation. By the 25th, the board discovered enough to terminate her, formally delivering the paperwork on the 26th. Official records proved she received a crucial contact on that fateful 26th day. After a frantic, brief exchange, she demanded to be the one who broke the news to Larry. But the timeline of deceit only darkened from there. Around the 25th or 26th, a sudden flight booking to Florida materialized under her name. She had dodged a critical meeting with the president, weaponizing a supposedly long-planned vacation as an alibi. However, the digital forensic trail exposed the lie. Cryptic emails sent to her daughter carried a bizarre spoiler alert regarding the sudden southern escape. A conversation with Mike on the 26th confirmed an abrupt itinerary change, locking Florida as the destination. They officially departed on the 28th, but her frantic mobile research on the 27th was terrifying. The midnight search queries zeroed in on something macabre. She was actively hunting for news reports detailing tragic drownings along the Florida coast. Specific keystrokes targeted fatal Cape Canal drownings, maritime accidents, and deadly waters. By the 28th, she was already traveling south to see the dark plan through. Within her first 48 hours on location, her search history exploded with hyper-specific, unsettling inquiries. A sinister pattern emerged. Endless searches, dissecting local boat rentals, murky dumpster waters, and isolated fishing spots. Investigators uncovered digital trails, mapping out aquatic depths and exact measurements to the darkest drop-offs. Detectives realized that before the couple returned from their initial trip, her search history remained suspiciously bare. Digital traces completely vanished. The digital shift occurred around the 8th or 9th upon their return. She casually mentioned to Jessica and others that Larry battled a sudden flu, claiming they both suffered. Yet, his medical records painted a drastically different portrait of the vacation. He suspected a mild virus, but neither his physician nor neighbors noticed any lingering symptoms. In a tight-knit community, neighbors walked a fine line between trusted confidants and watchful adversaries. The neighbor maintained that any visible signs of severe distress would have been utterly obvious. She insisted he would have naturally sought advice if something had truly been amiss. By the 11th, a chilling pattern emerged in her logs, searching why people succumbed to influenza. The forensic focus suddenly pivoted toward aquatic depth soundings in Pandora. Nighttime boating regulations were probed, alongside the exact nautical distance to Whiskey Rock, the most abyssal section of those waters. Shortly afterward, cellular data tracked her device to Pandora. More precisely, the signal pinged from Bayview on the morning of the 12th, lingering near 2 o'clock. The device remained stationary for a considerable stretch. At this juncture, investigators began unraveling the timeline. Lorie suffered termination for financial theft on January 26, 2018. The following morning, they fled to Florida, where her browser history exposed dark queries concerning coastal drownings right around their angling spots. Throughout this excursion, Larry suddenly succumbed to a severe sickness. Authorities theorized this was a botched assassination, presumably caused by an insufficient dosage of toxins administered by Lorie. Upon returning to Idaho, she shifted her lethal strategy. Ironically, the fatal nautical excursion had been Larry's suggestion. Hoping to display his affection, he arranged a dawn voyage. She answered this romantic gesture with murder. By the dawn of the 13th, investigative evidence placed them both securely at the marina slip. Cell towers captured the device, leaving their residence, pinging near Micah between 6 and 6:30. This digital breadcrumb solidly confirmed her early morning presence. Photographic evidence locked her at the launch at 6:40, corresponding with an outgoing dispatch tied to audio. That fleeting recording captured roughly 1 second of a man speaking, suggesting Larry still drew breath then. Yet somewhere between 6:40 and 10 o'clock, the narrative darkened. A mysterious event sent him overboard. Medical examiners found absolutely zero neurological anomalies suggesting a cerebral incident. Detectives ultimately deferred to the forensic pathologist for the grim, concrete, physiological realities of the case. Cardiac failure was ruled out. Instead, toxicology highlighted fatal levels of diphenhydramine, commonly sourced from pulverized allergy medications. The established facts painted a remarkably grim and calculated picture. Evidence confirmed Larry remained alive at 6:40 on the 13th. Following that, his fate was permanently sealed. Investigators safely concluded his demise occurred before 10:23, the exact timestamp her emergency broadcast was initiated. Sometime within that fatal window, catastrophic concentrations of diphenhydramine infiltrated his bloodstream. During interrogations, authorities questioned her familiarity with the sedative, probing her typical personal dosage habits. She admitted to consuming 2 tablets, acknowledging the intensely intoxicating fog the chemical routinely produced. According to rough forensic estimations provided by coroner Dr. King, the mathematical reality was horrifying. The medical examiner noted it required a massive, deliberate chemical influx to incapacitate him so thoroughly. Ultimately, whatever synthetic cocktail successfully breached his central nervous system, assuming he survived until 6:40 before plunging over, a haunting 30 to 60 minutes passed before she called. Analyzing the 6:40 to 9 o'clock window merely deepened the sinister mystery surrounding his demise. The timeline crystallized. Somewhere in that precise time frame, Larry unwittingly ingested an overwhelmingly fatal volume of diphenhydramine. As her own experience with the sedative proved, such heavy concentrations shut down the human body with terrifying speed. The investigator noted that a double dose of the allergy medication within 30 minutes would leave anyone completely disoriented. Her true motives remained an absolute mystery to the detectives. Medical experts confirmed the substance acted rapidly, practically paralyzing the victim and rendering them entirely incapacitated. These grim realities formed the foundation of the case against her. Every piece of evidence firmly placed Lorie at the center of Larry's suspicious demise. Authorities offered her a final chance to justify the damning details before forwarding the unvarnished file to the prosecuting attorney. This chilling narrative was heavily corroborated. Detectives meticulously reconstructed her digital footprint using cellular data, social media activity, and recovered electronic correspondence. Intercepted communications and strict chronological records formed the most devastating components of the investigation. Observing her cold demeanor and analyzing the couple's dynamic revealed a deeply unsettling contrast. To the outside world, their marriage appeared absolutely flawless and entirely devoid of conflict. Investigators routinely asked acquaintances if she possessed the dark capacity to murder her husband. Barely a handful of witnesses believed she harbored that level of lethal intent. Authorities immediately dismissed several of those accusers due to their obvious personal biases. However, one particular testimony stood out as profoundly chilling. This individual doubted her guilt, but offered a grim hypothetical scenario. They theorized the crime could only be rationalized as a twisted form of mercy. If she pulled the trigger, it was solely to spare Larry the agonizing heartbreak of discovering her profound betrayals. Historically, Lorie and Larry projected an image of genuine domestic bliss. However, bitter financial disputes poisoned the final months preceding the tragic homicide. Lorie obsessively drained their shared accounts to fund children from her former union. This reckless generosity plunged them into severe debt, entirely separate from her massive corporate theft. Lorie remained blissfully unaware she had stolen $500,000 from her employer. Detectives maintained she silenced Lorie permanently to bury her colossal financial fraud. She likely hoped adopting the grieving widow persona would manufacture judicial sympathy during her upcoming theft trial. Investigators compiled a relentless mountain of evidence, culminating in a highly detailed chronological map of the crime. Should she demand legal representation during questioning, the lead detective promised to reveal that exhaustive schedule directly to her defense team. Without her confession, authorities possessed no choice but to prosecute using the existing documentation. Every solitary clue indicated Lorie violently erased her husband before her catastrophic secret could be exposed. Simply put, the interrogator avoided unnecessary repetition, firmly asserting his deep understanding of their supposedly idyllic dynamic. Outsiders viewed their bond as an enviable miracle, worthy of profound gratitude. Their overt affection once disgusted onlookers, until a sudden, dark shift occurred during those final 6 months. Witnesses noticed obvious friction, exceeding typical marital hurdles. That summarized the devastating case against her. Interrogation immediately ceased the moment she formally invoked her right to legal counsel. The detective offered one final opportunity to clarify the chronological evidence against her. He coldly asked if the timeline made sense. Pushing forward, he established the protocol for future dialogues alongside her defense attorney. Legal procedure mandated strict audio documentation of the exchange. She agreed. Lorie initially caught a 5-year prison term for corporate theft, abruptly followed by an official homicide indictment. By 2021, she admitted to second-degree murder, bizarrely claiming the lethal cocktail was a suicide attempt. The judge rejected her theatrics, handing down a life sentence in May 2021, demanding 30 years before parole. The lingering shadow of tragedy consumes Lorie's children, inner circle, and bloodline, each irrevocably scarred by the premature theft of a genuinely gentle spirit. Acknowledgement is extended to the observers of this broadcast. For the newly initiated and the veteran witnesses alike, a descent into an exceptionally macabre past investigation awaits nearby, alongside an opportunity to explore the most recently unsealed digital archives. The most haunting tragedies don't always begin with a scream. Sometimes they start with a whisper of greed in a house of mirrors. The story of Lorie and Lorie Eisenberg is a chilling reminder that the person sitting across from you at the dinner table, the one who promised to protect you, can sometimes be the very person weaving your shroud. Trust is the oxygen of humanity. When we weaponize that trust for financial gain or to mask our own failures, we don't just commit a crime, we erase a soul. Lorie was remembered as a gentle spirit, yet he was discarded in the freezing depths of Lake Coeur just to silence a secret. But here is the truth that every shadow fears. The light always finds a way in. Whether it is a digital footprint or a chemical trace, the universe eventually demands an accounting. Let this be a lesson in the weight of integrity. A life built on deception is a house built on ice. It will inevitably crack. Choose honesty, even when it's painful. Treasure the people who love you, because once a life is stolen, the silence that follows is a debt that can never be repaid. Protect the sacred bond of family. Once trust is drowned, no water is deep enough to hide the truth.